Eons of time shaped its face. Wind and water gave it form. And until nearly the last decade of the 18th century, no white man had ever beheld its beauty. A creation of geography and glaciation, the largest natural lake in Pennsylvania had been known to local Indian tribes. But it was the accidental encounter by the local settler Benjamin Harvey that eventually intertwined the two forever. Harvey had been captured by a party of British and Indians in early December 1780, whereupon he and other captives of the engagement were marched to Fort Niagara near the northwestern frontier of the fledgling United States. Here, the prisoners of war from Wyoming Valley were kept with other Americans for the rest of the winter and into the early spring of 1781. Because of his age, he was nearly 60, Harvey was deemed not to be a threat to his British captors. He was released from Fort Niagara and began the journey back to Wyoming Valley on foot, following familiar riverlands. In his attempt to retrace the path his British captors had forced him over the previous winter, Harvey became disoriented and lost. When all seemed quite hopeless, a shimmer of water sparkled through the trees. Could it be the Susquehanna, a familiar waterway which would return him to Wyoming Valley? Harvey trekked forward to discover not the Susquehanna, but a magnificent body of water, teeming with fish and game. It was late June to early July of 1781, nearly 5 weeks after his release from Fort Niagara. Harvey's Lake, the blue jewel in a forest of green, would remain essentially undeveloped for much of the next half-century. Early land claims were held by those who would forge the history of northeastern Pennsylvania. Names like Hollenbach, Fell, Worthington, Lee, Schoten, and others. Then, by the 1840s, timber to supply a growing nation was big business, and timbering took its place at Harvey's Lake as a primary economic force. Nearby, in lumber towns like Knoxon, Red Rock, and Central, this scene was repeated. Northeastern Pennsylvania's northern counties had been blessed with an abundance of native hardwoods, red and white oaks, and the softer, popular construction lumber, pine, to help build 19th century America. Roads from nearby Dallas had been improved since the first one in 1821. And by mid-century, a merchandise store opened, and Lewis Allen had been named postmaster at the lake. Lumbering continued to be a primary business for much of the rest of the late 19th century at Harvey's Lake. But as summer cottages were developed by Wilkes-Barre area businessmen, it became apparent that Mr. Harvey's wonderful lake would become a summer haven. What no one suspected, however, was the growth the lake would enjoy as it entered its golden age, an age of late Victorian graciousness that would dissolve into the carefree spirit of the 20s and beyond. As the 20th century unfolded, the lake's popularity increased. We were on the move. Americans were driving in increased numbers, and the automobile put Harvey's Lake within reach of most who lived close by. It was a new century, and despite 2 world wars, Harvey's Lake seemed to be a sanctuary, a place where we were insulated from whatever went on in the outside world. Here, it was swimming, fishing, cottage life, and the ever-constant park that served as the center of it all. Mass transit, like the familiar streetcars and railroads that brought passengers from Wyoming Valley, made it easy for a family to enjoy a day at the lake. And what days they were! Upon arrival in Little Coney, what is now the Sunset area, picnickers boarded one of the steamers that carried passengers across the width of the lake to the famous picnic grounds. Longer-term visitors might choose to spend time in the opulent Hotel Oneonta, a 100-room summer palace built in 1898. But for those intent on the picnic grounds, the Shawness, Natoma, Kingston, and Wilkes-Barre all carried passengers bound for a day of fun at what would become the name to remember in summer enjoyment, the park. The park. Just to recall it conjures up the smell of electricity sparking against the steel roof of the dodgems, bathers in the water, and days that would etch memories to last a lifetime. Other attractions would develop that would draw, like Sandy Beach's bathing area and its pavilion, and certainly the drive-in theater. picnic grounds held reign as the center of the lake's activities. First developed by early railroading interests, the picnic grounds changed ownership several times during its growth and expansion. The park was known to most who remember it as Hansons, but it was under the ownership of the Winterstein family early in the century that the centerpiece of the park was installed. It would create the sounds and images that idealized Harvey's Lake for generations who enjoyed it.